Great.
How?
What did you give me?
What, really? How did you get me?
Did you give me tonight? Oh, wait.
How did you get me? Dang it. Why? What did you give me?
Yeah.
To make my
Heartbeat out my chest.
To make my heart beat out my chest.
All right.
I'll be messing up. So now don't get me wrong. This is a song messer upper.
I am, but that's Sam
through and
Smith.
through.
I know Sam Smith.
But she does know Sam Smith.
All right, everyone.
I know Jay-Z and Eminem.
Yeah, I'm terrible with the raps. Just recently with the Lil Wayne song, when he goes,
Listen.
she's so sweet. I'm so sweet. Look at me.
She say he's so sweet that she wanna lick
the
the
rapper. So I let her lick the rapper. I'm
She just
thinking
got
it's
that.
been a rapper, just a rapper,
She just
like
got
a
that.
cupcake rapper
She
the
just got
whole
that.
time. And I was like, oh my God.
She just got that. How long has that song been out, y'all?
I don't.
That song has been out
R&B
so long.
It's my thing. So he
All right.
knows all the rap songs. I know the R&B lyrics. Except for
I know a lot of rap lyrics.
Except for the thug.
Right. Cherish every
I'll
thug.
cherish every thug. Which is important.
You see what you've been growing up thinking, you know? That's why we just getting married. So listen, reality is, one, it's hot in this room. I'm gonna be honest with y'all. I got a black shirt on. I'm going through a lot right now. I'm thinking about sound quality. I'm sorry. I just say that. I'm sorry about the last episode. The sound quality, I am so sorry.
We had 4 mics.
Yeah, 4 mics.
And we could only figure out how to connect one. And we didn't know at that time which one was the one.
We didn't.
And it was unfortunately the one right under Jermaine.
And I'm the loudest laugher. The issue wasn't that I talk so loud, just that I talk so loud, but it's that I laugh so loud and I clap. So with that being said, okay, there's all kind of self-consciousness going on right now. I'm working on my hand movements. I do a lot of hand movements. I was like, damn, my hands moving. Apart from that, where's the handcuffs? Apart from that,
you just gotta do something here.
You're right. Where's the fidget thing that Miguel has? Clap anyways. Apart from that, we don't have the mics. We just have the mics on the computer. We're just gonna, don't worry about burps. We're gonna worry about that and just try to keep so we're working on it. See, look at all this hand movement. I'm working on it, y'all. I'm working on it.
Yeah.
And this.
Yeah.
However, we do want to have high energy. So with that being said, I talked to her, we gave her a little pep talk, listen to some music that we love. Okay,
Yeah,
we're gonna have some little energy in here.
I had a dental procedure earlier today.
She had a dental procedure.
Pardon the disheveled look. But we are going to talk today about communication.
And the rules of engagement. Communication. What was that? It was like, okay. Hands are still down here, guys. Communication and the rules of engagement. I wanted to talk about this because what had happened is we talk a lot about, things that how we got through things, right? But I don't feel like we're clear on how-tos. Like, this is what we do. This is what we don't do. This is what we do. This is what we don't do. Just for, not even because it's going to work for other people. Honestly, relationships are so unique. But just because it might be an idea that some people haven't heard of, because these are ideas that we didn't hear of before we started applying them, right?
Or we heard things and thought this is how you're supposed to do it.
Right.
You know how many people say, don't go to bed mad at each other.
Right. That's a terrible idea. Do you argue at 9:30?
Or maybe that works. Maybe that worked for one person and everyone was told that.
Or maybe it didn't work. It just sounded good.
And a lot of advice out there does just sound good. There is a lot of advice out there. So we're here to share
Just what works for us.
What we learned through trial and error. And then kind of the things that we've implemented from there and moving forward, that works for us
Right.
to remain part of our routine.
Right.
So
communication. They say communication is key. They say communication is everything. And we had to learn a lot of lessons about communicating.
Mhm.
In the beginning of our relationship, we did a lot of texting. I personally am a big texter. Dominique isn't a big texter. Wasn't a big texter.
I'm not a big
Texter.
talker.
Texter. She's not a big, yes, that's very clear.
So, let's
Yes,
just say
say
that.
that part.
Texting, phone conversations, maybe more so with phone. I'm a good listener. I like to listen, even in person.
Are you a good listener? I mean, I'm just saying. There's
In the beginning,
just because we listen, I mean, we're like, are good listeners.
I just like to listen. So when we first started talking, and like with a lot of relationships in this day and age where everyone has their phones and what's the most convenient thing to do, we both worked full time, we both had our lives, our routines. And when you're just starting to date someone, you're trying to find any and every opportunity to connect with them. And
yes,
you're only dating, like seeing each other physically. Like you can't just be like, meet them and be like, all right, we're gonna date 4 times a week. That's not what people do. They like, go on one date and then like even seeing once a week could be like, that's a lot. Like you must really like someone if you're like, and the next week. So in the beginning,
however, we did see each other a lot.
We in the early stages
intentionally saw each other more than twice a week.
That's true.
On weekends.
Jermaine made it very clear that he was a texter early on.
Mm-hmm.
I was surprised because I think that was one of the things that I noticed in previous relationships was like, not everyone's a texter. And so just learning that about different people, he very much communicated. And what surprised me was most people use text like, hey, good morning. How's it going? Let's create some plans, check in about the day, but nothing deep. Jermaine was like sending, like, let's have a whole conversation about like, politics and sexism and religion. And it's like, wait, what? We're doing this now, like in text?
To be clear though, she was not protesting these conversations.
No, because I wanted to talk to you, and I'm not opposed to having those conversations.
So I thought that these conversations were, look at this.
We both thought.
I thought that this conversation made complete sense. Everything was going to work out, right? We're talking about, she's responding, I'm responding. I thought they were good ideas.
So that, and we both thought, and that's the thing, I went, okay, he's a texter. One, that actually kind of works for me because we actually get to talk more than if we were waiting for phone calls when I'm free. I had a kid, I'm working now, I'm at work. Like it was more convenient because we could talk longer, more often if we kept it in text and then see each other in person. But one of the things that we found early on was that it created.
She's contentious.
Is that certain topics are triggering for people. So like I could talk to him about, or you don't know what's going to come up when you go, oh, there's this topic. Let's start talking about it, what it's going to bring up in you as you start digging into that. What is he going to say? He could say something, or I could say something. One of the things early on was around feminism and sexism.
Y'all see this face?
And
have you ever seen a gun with more than one trigger? I'm like, how can you be triggered?
Listen.
So I'm listening.
So we did learn and the hard way, because it went like, whoa, like, okay, the energy changed. Then we said, this is how it happened. I was working at Kaiser at the time. We're texting, there's an issue, and it goes, we should take this to the phone. So let's call each other. I mean, we're mad. Like, I'm mad. Like, we're both in a space. What?
I'm not trying, listen, I am
No.
trying, listen.
No.
But just for a
But-
good clarification, not to defend
Give an
myself,
example.
but to even just say this, I was somebody who didn't want to have a lot of confrontations. We need to have some confrontations, to be honest. We need to have some confrontations, but I didn't want to have these confrontations. However, I did want to make the relationship work. So when she was having some, clearly the energy was changing in the conversation and she was getting upset, I could tell. And I would say, man, well, listen, we're probably not going to come to an agreement because we can't, right? This is the issue with texting, right? The issue is we can't hear each other. So
Right.
when she interprets what I'm saying and I interpret what she's saying, I interpret it the worst way she could be saying it, and vice versa. So she's probably thinking I'm trying to like be mean to her, and I'm probably thinking she's trying to be mean to me. So we're like, let's actually listen to each other. I'm holding my hands again. Let's actually listen to each other and do our best to actually hear what the other person is saying. So let's try our best to talk more on the phone.
Right. And I think one of the things is we were actually meeting with the pastor at our church, and we came up with like, all right, you guys should have like a code or like something you can say if it's like not going, like, if you feel that communicating the text isn't working well, then you transition, like we should talk on the phone about this so we can hear each other's voices. The issue with that is we were already perceiving the tone to be one way in text. So it's not like we get on the phone and we're like, let's clarify. It's like, no, the guns are out. And it's already like, so what did you mean when you said this, and that? And so it's already, so we had a crash course early on in the relationship that said, and that it wasn't one incident, and it wasn't like, all right, we got to stop doing numerous, where we go, so much of our arguments are from texting each other. Like, it was just like, and not like, oh, where do you want to eat? Oh, you're not responding fast enough. It was when we were having these, sending paragraphs to each other. And it was like, okay, this has got to, and I think it was Jermaine who eventually was like, we just should not have these conversations, which it should, listen, needed to have been him, because he was the one who started it. I was just going along being like, he wants to have a conversation, we can have these conversations. But
tell her to own that. Right? Let's just,
since
we own and stuff, right? We got a house, right? Own that part, right?
But I'm just thinking that's what he wants to do. It's how he, does things. So we,
now,
learned.
how long does that take for us to learn that lesson? Maybe like a year and a half.
Yeah.
Right? I'm talking about, we were texting a lot at work, arguing at work, on breaks. When there was downtime at work, we're arguing, on the phone. We did that for a period of time. And after that, we said, let's do videos. We started doing Marco Polo. So that was like us getting out of the text and actually getting out of the talking on the phone, because that would actually help too, to actually see what she's saying and hear her, and vice versa. I thought that would be really helpful. And so we did that for a time. Actually, we still do that sometimes to this day. However, in time, we even start to say, let's not have difficult conversations, period. If it's difficult, if it's hard to explain, whether it's a difficult logistical situation, right? Where it's like, hey, like, we got to figure out what we're going to eat tonight. And we got to figure out, how we're going to get to and from work, for the next 3 days. Let's wait till we get home. Because it can go from this is just a conversation to something really difficult in a matter of seconds. And I'm talking about unintentionally. Like, this is not, nobody's trying to piece what I say? Nobody's trying to make anybody mad or piss anybody off, but it's happening because these emotions are arising.
Yeah.
So the reality is,
Did you
the
point
re- the way that
and I will say that it took a year and a half, not because we weren't trying to figure it out. I think when you're trying to figure out what conversations you can still have, and I think that's what took a long time to figure out. It goes, okay, well, certain topics, right? He goes, we're just not going to talk about feminism because it gets too heated. And I go, fair enough. Let's back off that topic, but
Right.
that doesn't mean,
we can't talk about other stuff.
So it's learning, and then learning how to talk about feminism, learning how to have hard conversations. That's for later on, but we had to slowly learn, okay, there's that thing. Maybe we shouldn't talk about, this through text. We kind of had to start seeing what conversations can we have through text, what's appropriate for text for us, what's appropriate for phone or video, and what needs to be in person, and what not only needs to be in person, but what needs to be one-on-one, because in person could mean, Micaelo's around, we're out at an event. It's like there it came, we created a dedicated communication time.
In
time, but
So-
it started, that's how specific I feel like and detailed we had to get about things, to the point where we could even be talking about something like dinner that doesn't seem like a big deal, but something happens and it goes, all right, he goes, no longer through text, like we won't talk about it through text. So being
Right.
able even to get to the point where we can stop in a conversation
Right.
and go, this is for later.
Right. Because
Mhm.
it is a certain level of self-awareness and humility, self-awareness and
Yeah, but it's
humility
real.
that allows you to say, I am getting mad.
Mhm.
To all my friends out there who like to say stuff like, I'm not mad. I'm talking to you. I'm talking to you, the ones who are not mad ever. Oh, you ain't even seen mad, yeah, y'all, right? So the reality is that took time for us to be able to say, I'm sensing that there's a problem in this conversation. Maybe we should wait.
Yeah.
And having the discipline to say, one, that sounds like a good idea. Two, I can hold this energy until later. So the first rule of engagement is don't have difficult conversations via text. The second rule of engagement was let's prefer having real conversations if they're difficult, at all, to have those conversations in person. If you can't have them in person, try your best to have those in times like in the evening when there is downtime, you're not at work. And so one reason why I wanted to bring this up is because, sometimes people struggle with not having arguments at work, right? Not being distracted at work because there's having an argument via text.
Mhm.
That was something that I was dealing with. And that is something that I'm sure that other people can deal with, especially when you can easily be triggered by something that your partner says, whether they do it intentionally or unintentionally, and have to be in a place where you just don't know how to not have that argument. Say what you got to say, because they just can't be sideways. And we're at a meeting, or I'm supposed to be typing and researching this and doing that. But oh man, they just messing with me, blood. And I gotta say something back, like, yo, like, why are you coming at me crazy? Stuff like that. So it did take time first, but it also took discipline, like you said, humility and stuff, to say, we're not about to have this conversation, even if it's small. We're gonna wait until later to have this conversation.
Yeah.
And I would even say, to the point, at one point, we literally said, we're not even gonna talk about feminism and stuff, because this is like, it was funny, because the reality is I, for the most part, was like, I agree with you. But it was like, insofar as she sensed, not that I said, okay, she sensed that there was like a little dissension or a misunderstanding, like I don't get it, you don't even understand my, that stuff, right? You don't understand what it's like, stuff like that. It was like we were about to argue, and I'm like, yo, like we literally can't even touch this topic without arguing about it. Let's set it to the side until we can. We still want to talk about it. This is real stuff, right? So it's actually more real than sometimes we want to admit.
Yeah.
But the reality is that we have to say, let's just not touch on that stuff until we're ready to touch on that stuff. Clearly, we're not ready to touch on that stuff.
And I will say that's what's couple specific, because for every person, those topics are going to be different. What can we talk about, and be kind to each other and be able to listen to the other person without attacking or feeling attacked. That changes for everybody. So yeah, taking time to learn what those are, making note of it, talking about how you talk to each other. It's like talking about talking. It's like, okay, how did this week go? We would have conversations like that, like, this was a good week. This is what didn't go well. This is what went well. And seeing patterns and then adjusting based on those patterns. I think I had a difficult time with that. Jermaine was good at seeing that, capturing like, okay, this was a rough 2 weeks. And I'm like, what do you mean? Like, these last 2 days were fine. He's like, the last 2 days were fine, but overall, and I'm like, I'm like, fine, we can talk about it. And what people's responses to conflict are, if you're learning about that, like who's avoidant, who is reactionary. We all respond to conflict in different ways. And so learning that for communicating is important, because a conflict will arise. And I go, I think that's what I thought. I want to talk about this right now. Like, we got to talk
Right
about
now.
this.
Because I'm feeling it right now.
I'm feeling all these feelings.
Gotta let them out.
We got to communicate, because communication is key. He's like, and in the beginning, he was like,
let's do it.
You're right, we should talk. And then it's an argument. And then it's nighttime. And then, now what? Now we're mad and it's before bedtime. So learning,
Can't go to sleep.
Learning what you need in order to be able to have a productive conversation, and to talk about the conflict.
Conditions you need to have.
And that came even after learning how we're going to communicate throughout the day. That came later on, because conflicts still happen. But once we figured out how we're going to communicate on a daily basis, then it became, all right, now we can talk about how we're going to deal with the conflict, because that's not like it solved all the conflict. Now we're just having conflict at different times of the day. So like, now how do we address when we are having conflict? And that, I will say, took longer than figuring out that texting and phone calls don't work well for us. Like, in person is best. But once we decided in person was best, it goes, well, now's the time to talk about it. We're together. And once we move in together, well, now you're here all the time. So we can just talk,
argue
all the time,
any time of the night. And it's like, oh man, like you can imagine, right? We don't want to be arguing around the kiddo. We don't want to be arguing while it's supposed to be dinner, or
so that means
arguing while we're watching TV. Like, it's like, we have to make sure that we contain this to some degree.
Yeah. And so that meant that a lot of these conversations and conflict were happening at night after the kids in bed. When we're trying to wind down, we're winding up.
Literally.
And,
okay.
And it was right. And it was
how do you go to sleep like this?
Not sustainable. It's like, okay. And then we recognize that, and we talked about that, like, okay, but what do we do if that's like the time that we have to talk is literally right before bedtime? And we had to go, well, then it just can't be before, like, we literally will have to revamp our schedule, our evening schedule to prioritize us talking so that it's not at 9 p.m. So that's when the idea came up around having a daily communication time, which was 7:30.
Mhm.
I think it's like we moved it around a little bit, but it's 7:30 now, and I feel like that's pretty consistent. So that started to work.
Well, go back a little bit. It started right around the time of the pandemic. So the
Yeah.
pandemic happened.
Mhm.
I'm talking about we're arguing like crazy, right? Yeah, I'm talking about the days. March 13th, okay, March 15th, it started to go down, right? Everything's shutting down. We're like, what? This is crazy. I'm like, yeah, this is weird. Here goes America, over exaggerating, overreacting all the time, dude. Whatever. Like, we're gonna be in this for like 3 weeks. But clearly, this is a lot. And we were having a lot of arguments. It was hilarious. It was like for me, like she was saying, like for me, I could see what the issue was. The issue was the world's falling apart, right? However, she was like, it's you, it's you. And so she would come home and she would be upset.
Wait, we don't gotta get into specifics for this. We're talking about look at him. I'm ready to tell everybody.
Listen. So so let me explain it. What was happening is we were arguing a lot in the evenings, and what it looked like is she was coming home with all this energy and she needed to get it out. And so I'm talking about when the door closed, it was on. And I'm like, hi, how's it going? Come grab a seat, let's debrief, right? Let's debrief about how work went. How's it going, right? How's it going? And she was like, ready for all the other stuff. What's on the kitchen? She hit the table. It was the cabinets. It was the stove. I'm like, what? Like it's a whole pandemic. And we're worried about the table. So we were meeting with the pastor, and I want to say it was the pastor. I want to say it was the coaches. And we're like, yeah, I think it was Coco and Patrick.
I think
we were doing both, but I think it was Coco and Patrick who threw out communication time. And so that was communicating at a certain time every single day, intentionally.
Mm-hmm.
What the pastor Erna threw out was coming home and taking time to ourselves, which was a good idea.
It was a great idea. Some time to wind down. So I think we got a little distracted, but I think, yeah, we did discuss in previous things like how identifying feelings was challenging for me and how all the work I had to do around that, which is important for communicating because I'm doing a lot of projecting and not really figuring out what was making me feel so, upset, right away when I would get home. But, it was the pandemic, it was everything that was happening during that time. I think therapy, right, played a huge role in me being a better communicator.
Amen.
And reducing the amount of conflict that we were having because everything was like a threat. Everything was a fight. That is like how I was wired and interpreting everything. And so I really had to, do that work. And I would say with the work we did with learning each other, what's the best time, the takeaways after therapy and doing our individual work was, it is still important to have that daily check-in with each other. Nowadays, we have less conflict, so we don't necessarily need to utilize a whole hour for it. Sometimes it's good to have that time if we just want to rest together, just take some time and chill with each other, watch something, or check in about how our days are going, but we don't have like, because sometimes we would literally have like 5 things we need to address.
Mhm.
And like, we won't even get to all of them. But because when we get stuck on like one thing, now we're like, is there anything? Is there anything? No. Well, we can just talk about our days and like just have this time with each other. Which is important and nice. We're both grateful for the peace.
Amen. So, like I was saying earlier, it took discipline to be able to say we're going to talk about this later. And so what that, oh man, so what it really took and takes. So the rule is, let's talk about it during communication time. We're going to talk about it, but I know when we get home, you see me, I see you. We know there's a problem.
Right.
Let's talk about it now. And it's like, let's talk about it at 7:30. So, let's knock out all the stuff. Let's get undressed, put on the house clothes, work out, right? I usually would work out before she got home or right after she got home, right after I got home, whatever, and have that space to myself, right? So having alone time, that was a whole other thing that Pastor Erna recommended, having alone time and spending time by myself, processing these thoughts and so forth. And eventually we get to the point where we say, okay, 7:30, we can hold whatever we're trying to hold, because there was a thing that happened today in the morning before I left home that annoyed me, that you did, that I felt was really disrespectful or inconsiderate or whatever it is. And I want to talk about it at work, but I didn't. And so let's talk about it now. Normally we'll probably talk about it by 9 a.m. However, we've learned to say, okay, whatever it is that I'm frustrated about, I can name it maybe and say, hey, like I didn't like something that happened, but we're not going to talk about it right now. No, I don't even do that. She doesn't even do that. We just wait until 7:30 and go, okay. So we know we have something to talk about. I'm like, yeah, she knows, I know something, the energy was off. What happened? And it was like, well, this is what I was thinking. This is what I was feeling. This is what you said. This is what happened, blah, blah, blah. And we do that. Now, if the argument can't be settled by 9 o'clock, we'd be having this disagreement, having this negative energy in us until 10, 11, 12, 1 o'clock in the morning. And not saying we're talking at 12 o'clock, after 11, we're done, right? But the energy is still there. So we know we're not cuddled up when we're sleeping. We're not touching when we're sleeping at all. Honestly, we're probably not really sleeping. And if we are sleeping, we're sleeping lightly, because I'd be sleeping, but I'll wake up and it'll be all in my mind, and I have the whole situation in my head.
So bothered right now, and he's like, how do they do it?
I would still be going through it though. Like I said, I wake up 12 o'clock, sometimes 11 o'clock.
He is at a party
11:30. Right. Interpretation, right? Yeah, he is in there and having fun. Like,
looking at him sleeping. And I should just
take him out. Take him out, Jesus.
Yeah. So yeah, the feelings are there. Are you talking about if we would be arguing up until 11?
Yeah, and it doesn't get resolved.
Right.
It doesn't get resolved.
And it feels like all that energy was for nothing.
Right.
Because
we don't agree.
We got nowhere and we're still mad at each other.
Still mad.
So, and I feel like the thought behind that was like, let's just solve this so that we can go to bed and be in this better space. Like, we just want to fix it right away. And I think, what we learn from that is, one, that prolongs it. You're feeling upset for longer. You're feeling all types of emotions at night when you're trying to go to sleep. And then it just starts all over again in the morning.
Only other thing I'll add to that is that sometimes everything is fine until not. Sometimes we had a good day. We were chilling. Everything was fine. And we were in the bathroom brushing her teeth or something. And she said something I didn't like, or vice versa. And the energy's off now. And now we have a conflict that literally just started
so
before we went to bed.
Yeah. So, and those things would happen. I would say that was hard, because for me, Jermaine was the one who was like, I think we need to take more time. There need like, if there is something like that, you know, if it starts late at night, we shouldn't even talk about it. If it starts earlier in the day and it seems like, so what we did at one point was like, and I think that was that Erna, or was it like the therapist ratings, like on a scale of 1 to 10, how big does this feel for me? Because if it's a 3, we can talk about it, right? It's not gonna be, it was this Erna. But if it's a 10, that's big. And, or, you know, an 8, you know, we are not gonna solve this in one day. And so that was helpful. I think that was the start of introducing the idea that like, you won't be able to solve everything in one go. I don't think it stuck then, because I was very much, I was like conflict, like avoidant, and there was another one, but I definitely am a feeler of feelings, and I want to react with my feelings, and then I wanted him to know how I was feeling and how strongly I was feeling what I was feeling.
And you wanted to make me feel the pain.
And I wanted him to feel what I was feeling.
The pain.
Which is painful to feel the feelings. And I was
to be clear.
Yes. So in one of the things was, let's give this more time.
More time than
like, we're not talking about it tonight.
Right.
And that, I thought, that can't be good. That's disastrous. Like, we're already, but what would happen, right? And I think why I was willing to give it a shot is that it would escalate right before bed. So it's like, that's already worse. Like, what's worse than feeling that way before going to bed? Like, I would be annoyed, but then we would just get more annoyed or mad at each other. I'm like, if I'm annoyed here and we just go, all right, we'll just talk about it, but not tonight. I'm still annoyed, but we're not like saying anything else, coming at each other's throats or anything. And so we'd be able to go to sleep and know we still have to talk about this. And he would check in. Oh, by the way, it was always me. Okay, I'm like, oh, Jermaine, are you ready to talk? FYI, it was, am I ready to talk yet? He would be fine. What we learned is I actually needed time, and I was the main one. Jermaine was willing to take time, but was willing to talk to me when I said, no, I want to talk now. He was like, all right, I can talk now. And we didn't realize I couldn't talk now. I wanted to be mad still. I had to learn and accept that time worked in everyone's favor. And for myself, because what I was feeling at 5 p.m. on Friday is not what I was feeling at 5 p.m. on Saturday.
Bingo.
It was complete, like it was so different, and it was so upsetting in the beginning because I felt betrayed by myself. It's like, you're telling me, like, I was feeling this way this day, but like now I want to like hold his hand and it's 5 o'clock. Just like waiting a day makes me want to be like, like, yeah, we can talk about it. And some things weren't a day. Some things took 2 days.
Right.
There were some things where it's like, actually, I'm not ready yet. I'm actually still feeling pretty upset.
Right.
And it's longer, and learning from that and going, wow, time really helps someone like myself who's so reactionary, to be able to let me feel those feelings and let them simmer down to the point where then we can connect.
Right. And it also helped me because I wanted to be the type of person who could communicate at any time. Like, I didn't want it to take too long, right? Especially if she was trying to communicate, right? Because we hear, guys need to communicate, guys know how to talk about their feelings, all these things. The other part is that, again, communication is key. So a part of me was like, well, I don't want to not communicate,
Right.
So if she says, let's talk about it, I know, let's talk about it. I want to be somebody who was willing to talk about it. So if we were still angry, it's like, let's talk about it. If we are still upset, let's talk about it. If you want to talk about it, I don't want to be running from conversations, especially if she was mad at me about something that I didn't, to be clear, wasn't confident that I didn't do something wrong. Like if I felt like I did something wrong or she said I was doing something wrong, I wanted to address that faster so it'd be understood like, yo, this is what actually happened. It was a misunderstanding. Let's get past this because I don't want you walking around with these false understandings of what happened yesterday when I was on the phone or yada, yada, yada.
Right.
And so we were trying to have those conversations sooner and faster, both of us. However, what we began to learn, like she said, because the emotions can be so high, we're most likely going to throw more hurtful words. We're most likely going to have sharper feelings, if you will, about something on that particular day. Now, this is dealing with some things that are either super difficult to talk about or sometimes that are just kind of difficult to talk about. But once we start talking about them, these emotions get bigger. Like that's the other thing. It's like talking about it doesn't always actually make it go away. It actually kind of makes them come back to life. And now we're arguing about what we're arguing about. So we're actually having more conflict because we're trying to solve the conflict before we're ready to talk calmly.
Right.
And so what I noticed in this last few weeks ago, we were having an issue was like, let's pay attention to the energy. If we can't talk about this calmly, we're not ready. Let's wait until we could talk about this calmly. So that literally took like 3 days. It wasn't a second day thing. It was probably actually wasn't a third day thing.
I don't remember.
It probably was like a fourth day thing. We had an issue on Tuesday, I believe, and we talked about it on Friday because as soon as it was coming up on Tuesday night, it was like, we're about to say some stuff we don't mean. Let's table this until Wednesday.
And timing, you can say, okay, maybe I am ready to talk about this, but what do we have going on? And
it's not a good time to talk
right, it's not
about
a good time. Are we supposed to show up at an event together and need to be in a certain space where we need to be like, I don't want to have this conversation before going here or doing this thing. So yeah, and do we have enough time? How much time do we think this is going to take? I know there have been some things where it's like, I'm about to have volleyball or like he has to go somewhere. It's like, we probably shouldn't talk about this at this point, even though, we said, a day, like we may be ready, but we also want to honor how much time we want to give this the right amount of time
and attention.
And so I think those were some big takeaways. The time, giving time to talk to each other, but then also giving time for our feelings and to be in a space where we can talk and actually hear each other in dealing with the conflict.
Because just because two people are talking and hearing each other does not mean that they're hearing each other.
Right.
Oh my gosh. If you're upset, you're probably not really listening.
Right. If I'm already thinking about what I want to say while he's talking, it's not time,
Right.
Just be quiet so I can say this.
Right.
Not ready. So yeah, I think that we're also in a place, one of the things we got to where I am more open now. And I don't know if it's open, but if he says, is because sometimes he recognizes in me before I can see it in myself. And I have to be, and that's hard. That's hard. I have to be, humble enough to accept that you know, I don't always catch myself. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. And not take it from him as, well, he's just shutting me down. Cause that's how it felt before. Like, if he's like, you don't seem like you're in a, who are you to tell me, when I'm ready and when I'm not? And I know myself, and I'm an adult, but, intentions, right? It's coming from a loving place. He doesn't want to argue with me. He wants us to figure this out and be able to talk about it. So there are times where he's like, let's rain check this conversation. Because I think you're starting to get, he's feeling it, and I have to, and there are times where I've fought that and been like, no. And I feel like now I can take that and go, you know what, maybe he's saying something, or maybe just him saying that allows me to take a pause and go, yeah, I was getting worked up. Accept that from my partner and not take it as, him being dismissive, but him being, him caring about our relationship.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Part of what I feel like was the biggest catalyst for making that last change too was being in a good place for a good amount of time
Mm-hmm.
and not wanting to just go back to being in a bad place. Because again, there were some months in particular between March and I want to say October in particular, where we were having a lot of arguments, period, whether it was weekly, monthly, whatever, we were having a lot of arguments. And what began to become clear was that around October and November, especially December, January into February, it's like we were not arguing like at all. And it was like, whoa, okay, what's his name? Let's start there. Okay. It was just like, how is this happening?
Right.
And with that being said, how do we maintain this? How do we not just get back into our old patterns
Mm-hmm.
and have a whole bunch of arguments as soon as the energy changes, right? As soon as you like, I'm offended today. And it's like, well, okay, you're offended today, but do we want to fight today?
Mm-hmm.
If we don't want to fight today, what can we do to deal with the feelings that we're experiencing? Let's talk about it when we can talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, not talk about it right now because we're feeling it, but and in the process of that, continue to be honest and real with ourselves. So it's still journaling, it's still processing our feelings and our thoughts. This yesterday I was feeling like this, and this morning I'm feeling like this, and this afternoon I'm feeling like this. And okay, by 2 days later, okay, this is what it wasn't really about. Okay, after all the feelings are starting to die down, the thing is this. Okay, another day. Okay, now this is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And when we talk about it, we can talk about it not only from a perspective of, let me tell you how I was feeling, but from a perspective of, this is even what this is about, right? When we can go, because we've done the therapy, right?
Mm-hmm.
So now we can go, this is the same stuff that we were dealing with when we were talking about that, because it keeps coming back to childhood stuff, it keeps coming back to ideals about what we, our partners are supposed to be, we're supposed to be, what we experienced with our parents, what we saw, what we didn't want to repeat, what we didn't want the other person to be like, and blah, blah, blah. And so it really is we're able to see the root of things much more clear by the next day or the following day or the following day. So when we can talk about it on that level, we can actually really get to some solutions. But if we can't, and all we're talking about is how you made me feel, and made me feel as a whole thing, we'll get to that one day too. But how I feel about this and what this and what this felt like and what you did wrong, and we're blaming each other and we're doing all that stuff, we're just scratching the surface on that
Mm-hmm.
level. When we can actually really sit and talk about it, when we can really say, man, this is what I brought to that. This is the difference between what you did and what I did to make this what it was. When we could talk about it like that, we can get much further.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's great when we're able to do that, and that we're able to do that.
Yeah, and it was a game changer for our relationship. Like you said, it got to a point where we weren't arguing for, it was noticeable. He was bringing it up, and I was like, interesting, like, it's true. And he's like, what is it? And I'm like, I don't know. I just, it's working. I did the work, and now it's like, now we're reaping the benefits of all of the time and attention that we put
Money.
towards, and money and therapy and walks and talking about the same stuff. It's like just trying to figure it out. And I think that goes to show, I don't think we're unique. I think that two people figuring themselves out and each other in the context of the relationship takes time, and it's ongoing, because like, we're not going to be the same, people who it was last year is not who I am even now. And so we're going to be constantly growing and having to figure it out. And so it takes a lot of intentional work to go, okay, this is what's working for us now. And then is it going to be the same thing that keeps working for us, in 3 months or in a particular season where things are harder than usual? Just being prepared, I think that's the big thing. Communication is key, but it's not as simple as just texting or talking. It's figuring out what works best for you and your relationship, and then also what work needs to be done as an individual to be able to have conversations in a healthy, loving way.
Sure.
Yeah.
So hopefully you guys got some gems from that. That has been a whole, this
Yes.
whole relationship, we've had to learn those things the hard way, not from the books, not from, even when we did it with, got assistance from the therapists and the coaches,
Mhm.
it was still not as simple as we heard it. Now it's easy to apply. It was like, we have to learn this, and we have to apply this. We don't want to,
Right.
but what I'm seeing, what's making sense is to give it a shot. And so please take those gems, and then share yours too. Let us know what gems what works for your relationship and how you guys communicate.
Mhm. Yes. So thanks for listening. We're about to go watch the Warriors game on
Yes.
TV.
All right. Y'all have a good one. Peace.